All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here on the Harmless Dave channel, talking about this big tour that was just announced. And I'm going to throw some cold water on this, folks. I mean, this is getting a little silly, um, but they're going to sell tickets, and I'm not going to go. But anyway, doing what I do in real time for a few real people out here, just like you and just like me, because I'm going to tell the truth about these bands. All right, all of them. Other than maybe Dave Mason, who is a part of this, I would probably go see Dave Mason because Dave is an original. He's an original himself. Okay, he's the original Dave Mason. It's not an imposter. But here's the lineup. And this is a pretty impressive lineup on paper, right? So you've got Kansas and 38 Special teaming up. The tour will also feature Jefferson Starship, the Outlaws, and Dave Mason. So you're thinking, hey, Dave, this is going to be great. Well, why would you throw cold water on this? The story goes on to say Kansas wrapped up their 50th anniversary tour in December that featured a return appearance by co-founding drummer Phil Ehart, who suffered a major heart attack back in February of 2024. Dave Hope also made an appearance. He's the original bassist who's still around. 38 Special will mark their 50th year as a band in 2025. It's been over 20 years since 38 Special released a new album. So, yeah, so those are your two big bands. And then you've got Jefferson Starship. Okay, Jefferson Starship featuring David Freeberg, who now sings We Built This City with the Jefferson Starship. Now, if you're not paying attention out there, you've got Jefferson Starship, and then you got Starship. Of the two bands, I would go see Starship with Mickey Thomas because he's the singer that people want to hear. He's the guy who sang Jane, a song that David Freeberg apparently co-wrote. But they're probably performing Jane, and they've got a young lady who's probably not that young anymore, who people are going to know her name because they follow this stuff, and I forgot, who's like the Grace Slick character in Jefferson Starship. And of course, Starship has their own Grace Slick character. So you got two starships, and the starship that's a little better for sure is the actual Starship. Marty Balon, who sang most of the big songs with Jefferson Starship up until the point where he left and Mickey Thomas came in, and then he sang some big songs with Jefferson Starship from, I would say, 79 up until they changed their name to Starship. I mean, the Starship material goes together well if it's the Mickey Thomas stuff. And the Jefferson Starship stuff goes together well if it's the Marty Balon stuff. Marty Balon has been gone for a long time. But David Freeberg holds down the fort. So you're basically getting a cover band from start to finish. I mean, when they do the Grace Slick stuff, and again, the lady who does the Grace Slick, let me see if I can. Kathy Richardson. Okay, it just popped in my brain. So it's Kathy Richardson, and she's pretty good. All right, she's pretty good, but nobody has been able to replace Grace Slick. The coolest thing about Jefferson Starship, the current incarnation, is Donnie Baldwin is playing drums for them. And if you know the story about Donnie Baldwin and Mickey Thomas, they had this brutal bar fight, and that's when Starship broke up. And they had come out with an album that didn't do as well as the prior two albums had done. And of course, the music industry was changing anyway. But Donnie and Mickey got into a real bar fight where I think Mickey Thomas had broken bones. So In any event, folks, that's the coolest thing about Jefferson Starship. Now, moving on, let's go through all of these, okay? Because it'll be fun. Now, again, I have no problem with Dave Mason, so I'm going to say cool. But here's what I would rather do: go see Dave Mason on his own, just Dave Mason, or maybe Steve Winwood shows up with Dave Mason somewhere. That would be cool, right? Um, so Dave is okay. Then you have the Outlaws, okay? And I want to say this. I'm pretty cool with Henry Paul. Henry Paul is good. In fact, if this had said Black Hawk instead of the Outlaws, I would probably be more enthusiastic about it. Another singer who's been gone for a long time is Huey Thomason. And if you're an Outlaws fan, Huey pretty much sang all of their radio favorites and deep tracks. Henry Paul sung a few songs early on with the Outlaws, probably on the first two or three albums. I mean, I'm not an expert on the Outlaws, but I do like them. And it's, again, basically a cover band with Henry singing all the songs that Huey used to sing. That's kind of what it is. Do they do a good job? From what I can tell, they do a good job playing this music, but it doesn't sound like the original Outlaws because, again, there's nobody in the band that sounds like Huey Thomason, and that's important. I think a better choice for this tour would have been Molly Hatchet, and here's why: because Molly Hatchet, even though I don't think they have anybody original in Molly Hatchet, they have a guy who sounds like the late great Danny Joe Brown, and they sound like Molly Hatchet. I know they don't have an impressive catalog, but I'd have to say it's equal to or greater than the Outlaws catalog. Um, but anyway, the Outlaws are out there, and Henry Paul is an original member, so he gives it some credibility there. But like the David Freeberg thing, you've got a guy who didn't sing any lead vocals on most of the songs. And in the case of Henry Paul, he's probably a couple of steps ahead of David Freeberg in that department. But man, this is just okay. I'm going to go see the Outlaws. All right. If there's a band down the street with a singer who kind of sounds like Huey Thomason and they're going to be performing the music of the Outlaws, I would be more enthusiastic. All right. And maybe a few years younger. All right. So who's next on this list? 38 Special. I'm a huge 38 Special fan. I am embarrassed by how few 38 Special songs are played on classic rock stations today. Chain Lightning should be on every classic rock station. And there are others that I have forgotten about, but there's just so many. During the 80s, they had a run of songs that went, I think, right up until 86, 87, and then even the stuff that came later without the great Don Barnes, you know, stuff like Second Chance, which is still played on adult contemporary stations, but stuff like Rock and Roll Strategy. It's just a great song. But just put that stuff aside and focus on all the Don Barnes material that's not on the radio. Now, if you do a before and after with the voice of Don Barnes from 1983, we'll say, and you pick a year in the 80s with Don Barnes for the most part, and you compare it to the way he sounds now, it almost sounds like two different singers. I mean, the constant touring, aging, and I know people are getting mad at me for pointing out all this aging, but it's happening to me. It's happening to everybody I know. It happens across the board. Nobody other than Rick Springfield and Ringo Starr have figured out how to just dodge this for a very long time. Don looks great. I know he's a great guy, but man, this is a greatly diminished band, and it's based on the vocals. That's where I'm basing this, because the band itself is pretty sturdy. They've got good musicians in the band, but man, I guess after a couple of $14 beers, It'll kind of sort of sound like 38 Special. And if your seats are lousy, there's going to be some echoing, and maybe they'll use a vocal track. Maybe they'll undergird the vocals with a track. I like 38 Special. The material, I mean, I grew up listening to that band more than a lot of other bands. Um, but this is, again, not the 38 Special from even 20 years ago, folks, when they put out their last album called Drivetrain. At least they were still trying to be creative, and I think Don had some gas in the tank, maybe not a full tank, but he had more than the fumes I think that he's running on at this stage. And I know that's mean. I know that's cruel, and I'm sorry, Don Barnes. I love you, brother. You're a legend. But, you know, the Kenny Rogers slogan here, you got to know when to fold them and you got to know when to walk away. And the money is going to be there for this tour. People will pay, and it's only going to go on for a couple of months, but the money is, I'm sure, going to be really good. Finally, we get to the headliner, Kansas. Now, Kansas is pretty much now a band with one original member who apparently doesn't always show up, or he doesn't always play throughout the entire night, or he's had difficulty standing for long periods of time. When you're in a band and you can't stand up for very long, well, Dave, what's wrong with being seated? It's okay, but this, I don't know, man. This doesn't convey rock and roll. All right? This doesn't. I get it that, I mean, if you're going to go see a lounge singer and he wants to sit down and sing, people aren't going to go, well, that's kind of weird. I can't believe he's doing that. And look, everyone who has compassion and grace and loves this music, they're going to say, yeah, Rich Williams, he could sit for most of the night. It's cool. It's fine. I just think people they're going on for too long here. There are just certain people that I think maybe need to walk away from this. Now, Rich, I guess, is still playing well. I haven't heard people complaining about his guitar playing. The lead singer in Kansas, he's not John Elefante. He's not anywhere near Steve Walsh. He's adequate. All right. I've come around to say that I think he's adequate for this band. I've got a friend who I've talked about here on this channel a lot. His name is Jerome Mazza. He would have been the greatest singer Kansas could have in this time frame. He's not better than Steve Walsh, but he's really close to Steve Walsh. And I can play a track or a link to a song that he did with Steve Walsh, and you guys can decide. It's almost hard to hear who's who in the song, and hence that's why I think Jerome Mazza would have been perfect as a singer. Kansas is probably the best of everything on this list, other than Dave Mason. But again, if you're looking for authenticity, original members, a vibrant band that is still out there, not only performing but creating. I know they've come out with albums not too long ago. 4 years ago, they had an album called The Absence of Presence, where they really ditched any of their more melodic tendencies and went real proggy, which is fine, but they're not playing the real proggy Kansas stuff on the radio, the older stuff. They're playing Carry On Wayward Son and Dust in the Wind, and that's kind of it, right? They just play like the two songs. You know, Drastic Measures is a really good album, the one with John Elefante. Fight Fire with Fire. It's just a terrific song that has been forgotten about, as so many others have. The 38 Special catalog. It's ridiculous. We're going to play Hold On Loosely this hour. Oh boy. Wow, that's adventurous. Maybe next hour, Rockin' Into the Night. Maybe. That's about it, folks. I know, so caught up in you. So there's like 3 songs. Here's a band with probably 20 or 30 rock radio songs, and we hear 2 or 3 on the radio, maybe, you know, Chain Lightning. Go listen to Chain Lightning. As far as Kansas goes, I mean, there's so much material. Um, I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought here, but if you're gonna go and spend, I don't know how much to see this, and you're gonna get little snippets. I mean, everybody's up there, so they're not gonna have a lot of time. I mean, the Outlaws can go up there and play Green Grass in high tides, right? And that will be it. You know, thank you very much. Thank you. We're the Outlaws. Have a great night. Enjoy the rest of the show. What? We got one song from the Outlaws because we have to move on to 38 Special. And Kansas is your headliner. So look, from a people watching standpoint and from a musician listening standpoint, this might be interesting and entertaining. All right. If you bring a notepad, you can take notes. And David Freeberg singing "We Built This City" is going to be, it's just going to be spectacular, right? That's the song that all of the corporate rock world embraced, and for good reason. And then all the critics came along and said, oh, this is the worst. But yet Dave comes from the era where, you know, it's hippiedom and, you know, sticking it to the man and so forth. So it's just weird because people will do anything to entertain others and to get that paycheck. I mean, if I were Jefferson Starship, I would not touch any of the Starship music. I would just do the Marty Balon stuff, which again, you don't have anyone in the world that can sound like Marty Balon. Marty was great. I miss Marty Balon, but I think he'd be like 95 or something today if he were still around. Maybe not that old, but the point being is that nobody even attempted to try to replace Marty Balon with someone who sounded like Marty Balon. And this is a problem for me moving forward. I mean, if you're going to continue with these brands, you've got to maintain the brands. You can't just say, hey, we're Jefferson Starship. Show up for our show. Hey, we're the Outlaws. The guy who sang lead, he's been gone for like 20 years, and they don't really play our music on the radio anymore. Shouldn't you at least try to recruit somebody? I mean, that's why I said Molly Hatchet would have been a better choice. Molly Hatchet actually sounds like Molly Hatchet these days. And I know that doesn't mean a lot here, but I would have put them in place of I would have put them in the place of even 38 Special, believe it or not. Well, definitely the Outlaws, right? Kansas, 38 Special, Molly Hatchet. You probably don't even need poor Dave Mason at that point. But you could put him in there, or get rid of Jefferson Starship. You know, you could make it more Southern rock because Dave Mason's kind of bluesy and he's got some maybe Southern tendencies. Probably not, but I think the music would match up maybe a little better. The point I'm trying to make through all this is that this on paper looks fantastic, but in reality, this is the ultimate bait and switch for people that grew up listening to this music. And honestly, 38 should probably call it a day pretty soon. Jefferson Starship should just merge with Starship. They should. And just go out there. I don't know, though, to put Donnie Baldwin and Mickey Thomas back together again, that might be an issue. But it might be fun. It might be fun to see. Anyway, my name is Dave. Thanks for watching. Patreon, YouTube memberships, buy me a coffee, super chats. I'm trying to rebuild this channel. This is the last attempt. I went down to Walmart. Apparently, they don't want me there. They say I don't have enough experience to be a greeter. So I'm back to doing this, at least for the time being. So if you can help me out with, some sort of financial donation to the channel, that would be appreciated. I did have a channel with 82,000 subscribers. People are asking me, am I still friends with Eric Clapton? And the answer is yes. So at some point, I'd like to have Eric on here again, and that might occur between now and the next few months. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe at least. And thanks for watching. God bless everyone, and I'll see you soon.